Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, good morning, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. As Pastor Chris said, we're in the second part of a 2-week mini-series called Finishing Strong. Last week, he encouraged us to take steps so that we don't get to January and think, oh man, what happened? What did I do this past Christmas? If you weren't with us, I just want to encourage you to use the app or check out our YouTube homepage and listen to last week's conversation. As he said, my name is Vinny. I'm one of the elders at Hoboken Grace. I'm also the Director of Financial Health and Stewardship. If we haven't had a chance to meet, as he said, this is my first time I'm up here having a conversation with you alone. So, naturally, I'm a little bit nervous. Actually, I'm really nervous. I'm kind of freaking out inside. You're going to have to laugh at my jokes, even if they're not funny. But naturally, I have a really great group of friends and colleagues that encourage me. And especially Pastor Anthony, as I was sitting down there earlier preparing myself for this, he leaned over to me and he said, Vinny, just remember, don't screw it up. Thank you, Care Pastor Anthony. And by the way, if this is your first time, come back next week. It'll get better. Let me tell you a little bit more about myself before we get started. I want to get one thing out of the way first, because I know if I don't, it's going to just bother you for the rest of the time that we spend together this morning. Because if we haven't met, you're probably thinking, where is this guy from? He's Asian. He's got an Italian-American name. He sounds like he's from Australia. Very confused. What's going on? So let me just clear that up. I was born and raised in Kentucky. Just kidding. That was a joke. I am a Brit. I'm a Brit, not Australian. Actually, I was born in Taiwan, and I moved to the UK when I was 8 to a quaint little seaside town outside of Canterbury in England. And I had the privilege of marrying a New Yorker. We got married in London, and when it was time to come back to the States for her or come to the States for me, my job was located in Jersey City. So I managed to convince this New Yorker to come over to the other side of the Hudson and come to New Jersey. Apparently, that's a big deal for some people. But 14 years later, we love it here. We couldn't imagine living anywhere else. So what's my role at Hoboken Grace? I oversee the things that we do to help our family live out spiritually, financially healthy lives. Spiritually, financially healthy lives. Financial Peace University, or FPU, is a big part of that. We have a great team that lead those classes. If you haven't taken it, I just want to encourage you. In a couple of weeks' time, our January classes are going to be available for sign up. Take it. If you've taken it before, you want to do it again because you're at a different stage in life, do it. We've got people that take it 4 or 5 times and get something new out of it every time. As well as overseeing FPU, I also spend a fair amount of time doing one-to-one or one-to-two financial coaching with people. And I also lead our benevolence ministry. Yet, despite my role, I don't have a finance background. My career up until 3 years ago was in IT. Some of you have written yourselves off when it comes to personal finance because you figured you don't have professional backgrounds in finance, you're not good with numbers. But I'm living proof that you can get this. I'm living proof because I've done some dumb things with money. I didn't start my first job until a year after college. I was running a failing business at the time, couldn't afford to pay myself, lived on credit cards. See, I would go out for dinner with as many people as I could gather. We would go out for dinner. And then when it came time to pay, they would bring cash and I would use my credit card and I would take their cash. And then that would be the cash that I got to live on until the next time I went out for dinner. I opened up lots of credit cards. I learned the balance transfer game until the banks wised up and stopped lending to this silly young man. Fast forward a few years later, I landed at Newark Liberty International Airport with my wife, who was 5 months pregnant at that point. We had put in an offer to buy a house in the suburbs of New Jersey 2 months earlier when we were here for a wedding. We landed on Wednesday, bought the house on Thursday, bought a car on Friday, bought a bed on Saturday, went to church on Sunday, and went straight to work on Monday, not knowing whether we would have a work to go to. You see, we landed in September 2008, the week that Lehman and AIG went bankrupt. And we were both employees of Goldman Sachs, the infamous investment bank. So here we were, both of us, dependent on the same bailed out employer, signed up to the biggest amount of debt we ever had, with a baby on the way. We were worried. And I know some of you in this room might be worried right now. Some of you are not, because you've given up already. Imagine with me, if you will, a time when interest rates were rising, gas was north of $4, and there was a recession looming. Sounds a lot like 2022, doesn't it? But as I said, I'm living proof. You can get this stuff. You don't have to have a finance background. You see, God expects us, irrespective of our background, to get a hold of his resources and invest it. And today, I want to take you to a story that Jesus tells about this topic. We're going to pick up towards the end of Matthew's account of Jesus in chapter 25. In the previous chapter, Jesus begins telling people what the future is going to be like when the kingdom of heaven's reestablished. Listen to what it says in chapter 25. For it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. To one, he gave 5 bags of gold, to another, 2 bags, and to another, 1 bag, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. In the story, the master is, of course, God, and the servants are us. After the master goes away for a long time, he comes back, and the servants have to explain to the master what they did with his resources. The servants entrusted with 5 bags and 2 bags of gold, each invested and doubled what they were given. And they were able to give that back to the master. And to each of them, the master says, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a few things. I'm going to put you in charge over many things. Come and share your master's happiness. So far, so good. But then we come to the servant who was entrusted with 1 bag of gold. Listen to what it says. But the man who had received 1 bag went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. In other words, he didn't do anything with it. He was quiet quitting. And this is what the master, or God, in the story had to say. You wicked and lazy servant. You should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I return, I would have received it back with interest. In other words, if you don't know how to invest it, the least you could have done is given it to somebody who does, and then I would have earned something. We might be sitting here and thinking, hey, God, that's a little harsh. At least he didn't lose it all on the stock market or, buy pictures of apes with them, right? But if there's anything to learn here, it's that God expects us, all of us, to more than just manage our finances. He expects us to invest his resources and for it to bear fruit and make returns from a kingdom's perspective. And don't miss the amounts here, because you might think we ought to have a bit more sympathy for the person who was entrusted with 1, but God expects even that servant to manage and invest the resources he was entrusted. None of us get to get out of this. But unfortunately, the reality is some of you are burying your resources. For some, it might mean that you're spending it all and you got nothing left at the end of every paycheck. For others, you might have a very high net worth, and you're still burying your resources because you're not investing it to generate returns for the kingdom. So this year, we're going to finish strong and have no regrets. I'm going to share with you a few things that I typically do at year end. They've been really helpful for me, and I hope they'll be helpful for you. First one is we're going to gift differently. Last week, Pastor Chris encouraged us to gift differently, and we're going to flesh out that a little bit more. You see, Blue Monday is the name given to the third Monday of every January every year because it's statistically the saddest day of the year. The weather's terrible, right? It's freezing cold. But more importantly, it's sad because that's when the credit card bill hits our mailbox. And we have to confront the spending that we spent over December and November. We don't want Blue Mondays, no. Next year, we want to get to January and have no regrets. And in fact, just celebrate what a great year we've had, what a great holiday we had, and how we were able to enter into generosity. So this is some of the things we're going to do to have a great end of year. Number one, real quick, don't get into debt. Set a budget for the gifts. Start saving for the gifts now. Stop the arms race. What do I mean by that? Let's talk about the last one a little bit more. I want to just recognize that some of you have the love language of gifts. What I mean by that is you experience love or intimacy when you give or receive gifts. And you have large extended families, don't you? And friends, and they have the love language of gifts. And you want to just love them well. But the mistake that we make is when we put all of that together, we might end up buying 20, 30, 40, 50 gifts, and then we've got nothing left to invest at the end of it. But something I want to remind you, you're not alone, right? Because your extended family and friends, they experience Blue Monday just like everybody else. They have the same pressure, and you get to break the cycle. So I'm going to suggest, instead of buying 20, 30, 40, 50 gifts, set up a Secret Santa or a white elephant and agree on a limit for each gift this year. You see, the joy of going through that and being thoughtful about that one gift can really be as meaningful as planning to buy all the other ones. One of our closest friends has the love language of gifts, and they used to buy us these gifts that were really great. And we would feel kind of this pressure. We would feel a lot of pressure to reciprocate this year. A few years ago, we had this idea for them that was a little bit more expensive than what we had planned, but we did it anyway because, we wanted to convey love and joy to them. You know what happened, right? After the love and joy, there was the arms race. This is what I'm talking about. The following year, they outdid us. Did we enjoy the gifts? Absolutely. But did we feel more pressure to outdo them the following year? Enormously. And so we kept trying to outdo each other at every occasion. So this year, I'm going to be buying them a Bentley. I'm going to win. No, don't do that. Stop the arms race. Have the conversation and set the limits. Incidentally, can I just show you my favorite Christmas gift I've had recently? I actually got it at a white elephant, and this is not a type of gift you wouldn't get outside of a white elephant. I want to show you this. You see, this is what you could be missing out on. Can we get a close-up? That's Pastor Chris. That's a doll of Pastor Chris. He's part of the family now. We take him everywhere. We go on vacation with him. And if I have a bad day at work, I go... See what you're missing out on? So that was tactics. Now let's talk strategy. Strategy requires planning, right? So what I want you to do is I want you to set aside half a day and plan out your 2023 financially. If you're married, I want you to do this with your spouse. Get a babysitter, bring a laptop. We're going to start the meeting and talk about what's really important to us. If you're single, I want you to start by writing out a series of statements that describe what kind of person you want to be next year. It might sound something like, this year, this coming year, I want to prioritize my health despite my busy schedule. Or I want to be a person that's really hospitable. I want to have people over a lot. See, when you have those statements, you can come up with a plan to execute them. If you're a married couple, I want you to spend the first 30 minutes, at least the first 30 minutes, talk about why. Talk about why. Don't start with what and how muches. Talk about why. Because when we focus on what's and how muches, we tend to get into a fight, don't we? You might say something like, honey, I want to double our restaurant budget. And you might get a response like, that's ridiculous. Don't be so wasteful. I know you're the one that cooks. Don't be so lazy. But instead, if you were to say, I miss you. I wish we had more time together without the kids like we used to. Or, I'm afraid I'm not doing well at work and I might lose my job soon. And we really don't have enough saved up. That's a different conversation, isn't it? Once you're clear on the whys, you can create an annual budget based on what's important to you. Doing a year-long budget may sound really scary, but it's not. Some of you do this at work already. This isn't any different from doing a monthly budget. In fact, in many ways, it's easier because you start with your annual salary, take out the taxes and other things, and divide it by 12. That's what you got. Or you can take your current monthly budget and multiply it by 12. The beauty of doing an annual budget instead of doing it monthly is that you get to level out the month-to-month noise, and you can be really strategic. You can be strategic about spending on things like insurance and travel. You know, those expenses that come every few months or once a year, where you're probably currently scrambling to pay for them, or you put it on credit and pay for it after the fact. Instead of doing that, you get to be strategic and set aside money to be able to pay for it. And you can be strategic when you do this about savings, investments, and giving. Once we take care of 2023, we're going to look further beyond and see where we stand. You see, this is a time, it's a really good time to look at where you stand in terms of retirement or college planning, if that's applicable to you. There's a bunch of retirement calculators out there. They all do the same thing, so you can just find one on the internet. Essentially, it'll take your current age, how much you've got saved up, what you're going to be saving going forward, and different rates of return. You can play with different numbers, and it's going to spit out a number for how much you're going to have at retirement. I often do this with people when we do financial coaching, just to see where they're at. And in about half the conversations, it's a shock. It's a shock to people. For some, it brings into focus a pretty grim reality of the future if they don't do something about it. For some of you, you need to have a conversation with your future self and think about how much you care about him or her. Or, maybe more accurately for some of you, if you have people that love you, that you're going to be dependent on, your parents, your siblings, your children, you need to think about whether your choices today is worth their future sacrifice. For some of you, you're going to run that same calculator and you're going to be shocked in the other direction, because some of you have been diligent, you've been responsible, or you've had supportive parents. However you got there, you run that same calculator and you're going to realize how rich you're going to be, how you're going to have more than you'll ever need, and then some. And you're going to have to ask yourself some pretty uncomfortable questions about whether contributing to that further is like burying it in the ground. In my role, a lot of people ask me what I think about giving. Some of the questions I get are, Do we tithe on the gross or the net? The great evangelical question. What about tithing on capital gains? Does the tithe include non-church or non-Christian charities? Does the Old Testament tithe, that is 10%, still apply under the new covenant? They're all variations of the same question, aren't they? How much should I give? Why do we ask that question? I want you to spend today and think a little bit about what's at the heart of the question. I know for some of you, it comes from a good place. You want to be obedient. That's good. But I think if we dig a little bit further, at the heart of the question is, what's the minimum I can get away with giving to the one who gave it all to me? To the one who gave me everything? To the one who gave everything for me? What's the minimum I can give him? Isn't that the wrong question? If we're going to live out the reality that God owns it all and we're merely managers of his resources, how much should I give is a wrong question. If we believe that giving is better than receiving, how much should I give is a wrong question. If we believe that contentment, worship, true life is found in generosity, how much should I give is a wrong question. How much do I need? How much can I give? They're better questions. About 5 years ago, my wife and I came up with a number that we decided would be our finishing line financially. This is the maximum number that we've decided to have for retirement. Every year we review how we're doing against that target, that finishing line. In years when it looks like we're on target or we're going to shoot over that target, we may not save at all and give it all away. We actually dream of the day when we can give 100% of our income. That's what we're working towards. Would you consider making that your goal today? Would you dream with me the difference that we could make in this world if the family of this church would all have that goal? By the way, I recognize about 5-10 minutes ago, I probably lost half of you when I said set aside half a day to talk to your spouse about money, because you're probably like, Vinny, while I'm there, I might as well pay the divorce lawyers, right? When it comes to money, we usually fight. What's the point of talking about it for 4 hours? It's going to give me heartburn. Make no mistake, this meeting that I describe isn't a money meeting. It's a priorities meeting. And it might be the most romantic date of the year. You think I'm joking, but it really is. My wife and I always leave this meeting closer and more intimate because we know at the end of it, we're aligned on the big stuff and we're going in the same direction. In 2015, both my wife and I had extremely demanding jobs, and although our careers were going well, our home wasn't. It was in this meeting that we decided that one or both of us would have to make a change at work. And so we were able to come up with a plan to make that happen. And actually the year after that, both of us ended up making a change. It was in this meeting in 2016 that we decided with our savings, we could pay off our mortgage and live completely debt-free. At this point, she was a stay-at-home mom, and we decided she could continue to stay at home, even though she had a far higher earning potential than me, and we were leaving money on the table. In 2018, if you were with us, at the end of the Be Rich series, God had called my wife back to work to be a missionary in her workplace. And it was in this meeting that we solidified the plan that I would once again quit the corporate world. This time, not just to focus on the kids, but to come onto staff at Hoboken Grace in my current role, and to be able to do that without taking a salary. My family's stories are in these meetings. My children's children are going to benefit from these meetings. I can't wait for this year's meeting, and I can't wait to hear what comes out of yours. The last thing I want to talk to you about to finish strong this year is to invite encouragement and some accountability. Because being intentional about finances isn't easy, is it? We're all really good at lying to ourselves. Sometimes we need somebody that loves us enough to get us to pause before we do something that we're going to regret. Sometimes we need somebody that loves us enough to tell us that what we're about to do is really dumb. And sometimes we just need encouragement. Like we've made a mistake. We're already beating ourselves up about it. Or when circumstances external to us come and mess up all of our plans. Like a recession. Like around the layoffs that we didn't see coming. Nobody's beyond the need for accountability. When the elders of our church get together, we ask each other regularly these 10 questions. Some of them are, did you spend time with God since our last meeting? Did you lead your family spiritually? Did you look at or watch anything on the internet you shouldn't have? Did you compromise at work? Did you lie to us? The concept of privacy and secrecy isn't biblical. God doesn't tell us to keep secrets from other believers. You see, when we keep something in the dark, that's when the enemy can use it. But when we shine light on it, that's when Jesus can use it. So what I want you to do right now is I want you to get out your phones, open up your banking app, and just show the person next to you how much money you have. Just kidding. Don't do that. Don't do that. Definitely don't do that. I'm not suggesting that. I'm not suggesting we tell everybody the details of our finances. That's not wise. That's not what we're talking about. In fact, if you share it with the wrong person, it really could cause envy. So we're not going to do that. No, instead, what we're going to do is we're going to pray. We're going to look for people in our lives that we trust, that we can share our finances with. By the way, one of the best things about my role is when I get to see somebody put some of this stuff into practice. And I want to show a story to you about somebody who did. When you check this out. I'm here with my friend Jose, and we did a really cool thing a couple of years ago, and it's something that we've repeated every year. And I just want to talk about it with you. So, Jose, we've known each other for a few years now. And yeah, a couple of years ago, you came to me with a proposal. And tell us what that is and how that came about.
Yeah, so that proposal 2 years ago was to look at the financial plan of the previous year to show you, hey, Vinny, this is the income that I have here with my wife. This is the debt that we have. This is the cash, income is cash flow, but also these are our investments relative to anything that's not 401k or just side items, and wanted to show and ask you, hey, how much do I need to save over a long term, as in what is enough to save? Because in the past I struggled with how much should I give, and I realized reading a book that mindset of how much should I give, pre-tax, post-tax, I should focus more instead on how much do I need to survive, and then give the rest away towards building the kingdom of heaven. And talking with you through it, just understanding and how you've approached that problem as well, helped me and Maria also plan out our future year on a year basis opposed to a monthly basis.
That was really cool. And I do that with some people, but in our culture, that's not a normal thing to do, to kind of lay it all out there and say to somebody who's not in your family, hey, these are all my numbers, and this is what I'm planning to do. What prompted you to do that?
Well, one is at least the topic that you're bringing up, that in society we don't talk about numbers. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we can, or at least I do with friends, like your coworkers. Sometimes, how much did you make this year? A raise, mm-hmm. But then you never go to the next level. Like, hey, what debt do you have, or what are you doing with spending your money beyond just knowing when they're taking a vacation or buying a car? It's like, oh, I know where you're spending your money, but that's it. Or how are you planning? Are you maximizing your 401k? But no one's giving advice in those conversations. You're just gossiping, I guess. And talking through this with someone like yourself and having an accountability partner is the intentionality behind it to say, hey, let's talk about your income, your future plans, and how to plan through it and save, but also spend at the same time. Because being too frugal isn't necessarily the best, because it does have some negative impacts, such as, well, have you taken a vacation? Like, you working this much, take a vacation. That type of advice, or at least, it's not even advice. The pushing aspect is so valuable.
You use the word accountability there. That is sometimes a bit of a church word. Like, what is that? What does that mean to you? How would you describe that to a friend at work? What is accountability?
How would I describe accountability in work? I would say thinking about them frequently and getting involved and asking questions, not for the sake of asking, but to also provide a solution or options of solutions and let you decide those options. Be an advisor of sorts. And just being available is the best part about all that. If you're accountable to someone and you say you're going to help them, they reach out to you, pick up the phone and be there. That's why I think, and that's why I would tell my coworkers.
Yeah, that's really cool. And thank you so much for that. And I really hope that your story can be kind of a jump point for many people to seek accountability in their financial plans.
Would you just thank Jose with me for sharing that story? So we want to encourage you and be available as an accountability tool for you to do. You can do that today. If you open up your app right now, under the Home tab, you're going to see a button at the top called Declaration. If you click on it, you're going to see a set of statements that we believe summarizes well what it means to be financially healthy. It goes like this: as a steward of God's resources, I commit to living humbly by acknowledging daily everything I have belongs to God, intentionally, freely, wisely, generously, and strategically. If this looks familiar to you and you feel like you've done this before, that's okay. You may have. It's okay, because think of it as a renewal of the vows. When you sign this declaration, our commitment to you is that we're going to check in with you regularly to see how you're doing. And we're going to be available as a resource to you if you ever want to talk to anybody or just need encouragement about where you're at. We did something throughout the Home Initiative between 2020 and earlier this year. Afterwards, we heard from a number of people who found that very helpful, and so we're bringing it back. Remember, this declaration isn't a legal document, and there isn't a social obligation either between you and this 501c3. If you're a visitor with us today, you're not sure about this God thing, this isn't for you. I recognize that talking about giving in church sometimes is awkward, because it could seem self-serving, that we want something from you. But I really want something for you. True life. See, some of the most significant spiritual events of my life have been through giving, and I want that for you. Earlier, I told you that in my role at Hoboken Grace, I don't take a salary. One of the reasons for that is because I knew there would be times when I would call on you to give. And I didn't want there to be a perception of a conflict of interest. I wanted to remove all of the barriers for you to take that step. So I hope you're going to take this next step. You might be praying about this already. You might be in your planning for your 2023. You might come up with a giving target. Once you do, we want to be available as a tool for you for accountability and encouragement. So underneath the declaration, you're also going to see a box where you can commit to a giving number for the next 12 months. This is optional, just to just to reinforce that. And it's also confidential, but I do hope you're going to take advantage of it. Every 3 months when you get your giving statement, we're just going to tell you that this is your giving to date and this is your giving target. May we, as we leave, may we be a family that loves endlessly without spending irresponsibly this holiday season. May we be strategic, surrendered, and eternal when it comes to the resources that God's entrusted us. May we invite encouragement and accountability into our lives. Will you pray with me? Father, you look after us so well. You give us everything we need. We get to manage and invest your resources. What a great thing to do. I pray for everybody here to be able to finish the year strong, to be strategic, to have a mindset of generosity, to have true life. And I pray that we do it well, so that at the end, when we meet you, we can say, here it is, God, and you get to say to us, well done, good and faithful servant. Amen.